Let's give them a round of applause, please. A round of applause, please. I must say that I'm a bit disappointed because I thought we will all stand up and do a little bit of step. So please promise that with the next song that they're going to give, we will be able to just stand up and, dance. This is a day of celebration. We're here to celebrate. Very good afternoon to our distinguished guests, esteemed academics, students, colleagues, and friends. My name is Gloria Sipula, and I'm honored today to be co-directing today's program with my colleague Nomhle. She will introduce herself later. As we proceed with the opening and welcome, we recognize in absentia the Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa, Professor Lenka Bula. In attendance, we recognize Ms. Natasha Ali, the CEO of Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation and the Tambo family. We recognize Dr. Erin Nodier, the Acting Regional Director of UNISA Gauteng Region. We welcome our guest speakers, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, who is an academic at the University of Witwatersrand. Ms. Liana Joubert, the Deputy Registrar, responsible for student administration and systems and integrations at UNISA. She will be presiding today on behalf of the Vice Chancellor. We also recognize Dr. Bunki Pitswana, who is one of the program participants and a head of counseling, responsible for student counseling at Gauteng region. We also welcome our panelist, Dr. Sithembile Mbete, the Executive Director of the Public Affairs Research Institute. Mr. Thabo Makwakwa, who is a senior journalist at Independent Media. Mr. Aubrey Mashiki, an independent political consultant and author. And our sign language interpreters, Kamogelo Ramuloja and Eula Dunstan. We recognize the National Student Representative Council and other students in attendance today, representatives from the National Provincial Office, local government, legal representatives, business community, civil society, political parties, research institutes, institutes of higher learning, and various organizations and foundations who have honored our invitation today. Representatives from various media houses, members of the university community, staff and students, and our esteemed guests present here today. It is an honor and a privilege to welcome you to this year's memorial lecture. Today we gather not only to celebrate the life of Oliver Reginald Tambo, but also to reflect on the values he stood for, which is justice, freedom, and service to humanity. I'm going to introduce. Okay. All right, I'm just informed that our first speaker is going to be with us in a few minutes. So I would like us to take this just 2 minutes, get to know the people that are around you, greet the person that is next to you, greet the person you haven't seen in many years, so that when the program starts, we don't do ne? So I'm giving you the opportunity to just greet each other, and we will also just request our choir if they can just bless us with one more song before we can introduce our speaker. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause as they come forward. Let's give them another round of applause, please. Thank you so much to the choir. Okay, so we are continuing with the program. And to set us off, it is an honor for me to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Erin Nodia, who will be setting the scene and providing the context for this event. Dr. Erin Nodia is the Acting Regional Director at UNISA Gauteng Region with over 30 years of experience in higher education, learner support, and ICT integration. In her current role, she oversees academic support services, library, counseling, tutorial services, regional offices, as well as computer laboratories. Her previous leadership roles include Deputy Director of Facilitation of Learning and ICT at UNISA, Head of Facilitation of Learning, and Regional Academic Manager at Technicon SA before the merger with UNISA. That is where she developed and institutionalized student success programs such as tutorial systems, peer collaboration learning, academic literacy, and work-integrated learning. These initiatives significantly improved student performance in high-risk modules and strengthened UNISA's learner support framework. She holds a PhD in learner support, an MTech degree focused on evaluating tutorial systems. With a background as both a lecturer in computing and senior programmer in the banking sector, she brings a strong mix of academic and technical expertise. Outside of work, she enjoys cycling, running, and restoring vintage cars. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Erin Nodia to the podium.
Thank you very much. As introduced, my name is Erin Marie Nodia, the Acting Regional Director for Gauteng at the University of South Africa. I feel truly honored to stand before you today in this September occasion, being the 5th Oliver Regional Tambo Annual Memorial Lecture. On behalf of the University of South Africa and the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, I am here to set the scene for what promised to be a deeply insightful event. I would like to recognize and thank all dignitaries, council, officers of the VC, UNISA Executive Management, our Deputy Registrar, the regional directors, the foundation, political representatives, business partners and leaders, diplomats, alumni, students, guests present with us today, whether it is in face or online. Your presence affirms the significance that UNISA's place on Mr. Tambo's legacy and our collective responsibility to foster ethical leadership and intellectual growth across the continent. It is also fitting that we hold this lecture today in the OR Tambo building, named after this icon of the liberation struggle and democracy. UNISA and the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation found it prudent to dedicate this year's memorial lecture to the youth, the young leaders, to give them a platform and a voice in shaping future for just leadership in South Africa and beyond, tapping on OR's vision, his wisdom, his leadership principles, and his impeccable ethics as a guide. Hence, the theme of today, Legacy in Action, Oliver Tambo's vision and the future of just leadership in South Africa. You will notice in the audience and the speakers today that we are now attracting knowledge from the Gen Y, the Gen Z generation, and also called as the 2K. Just to elaborate, the Gen Y, the millenniums, were born from 1981 till 1995. Beyond the economic hardship that this generation faced, they're also known for their adaptness to technology, having witnessed the rapid development of technology development from a young age. Leading today's lecture is Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, a millennium, born in 1989, a young man wearing many caps as lecturer, a podcaster, an author, a musician, an activist, followed by what promised to be a vibrant discussion looking at the distinguished panelists in the program. Being aged at 36, he has just missed the youth categorization, which we placed at 35. Still, he has accomplished much in the academic space on his age. We call him young. Yeah, time flies fast. It is hard to realize that the Gen Z and the 2K, born from 1996 to 2012, are not amongst us professionals, continuing to shape the workplace in a unique manner. We are the first generation to have largely grown up using the internet, modern technology, social media, and emerging artificial intelligence. Gen Z hold a special space in South Africa, having been born at the dawn of our democracy. They therefore have a unique lens through which they view our country. Members of Gen Z are the voice of today's youth, with many of its members stepping forward as young speakers and leaders like Sizwe. Yes, and of course, you will notice the generations run out of the alphabet and start afresh with Gen Alpha and Gen Beta. Generation Alpha, the so-called iPad kids, entrenched in smart devices, were born from 2012 till last year. And Generation Beta is now the babies of 2025, who will face artificial intelligence challenges, global environment challenges like climate change, water scarcity, and many others. I also want to say to you, the 2023 graduates were the last cohort of students who passed their qualification without the support of artificial intelligence. Now more about our Tambo. Tambo moved of being a teacher and becoming a lawyer, and then moving on to lead the African National Congress as its president for many years, during which time he became a very astute and skilled negotiator who transformed the ANC into an organization that was ready to move from being a liberation movement and hold its 48th national conference in 1991 in Durban, the first conference after being unbanned. Tambo was one of the founding members of the ANC Youth League in 1944, becoming its first national secretary and a member of the National Executive in 1948. The Youth League made several proposals that were aimed at transforming the ANC at that time and enable it to adopt to what was required at that time. He was adept and versatile enough as a leader to easily navigate the role of being a highly skilled diplomat, representing the ANC to the international community, as well as being a commander-in-chief of the armed wing of the ANC. Many leaders are good at either diplomacy or the military, not both. Many believe that to be an effective leader, you must have a commanding style of leadership. Tambo was gentle and certainly not a commanding type leader. He was the longest serving president of the ANC, during which time he helped the oldest liberation movement to navigate several changes and stages of transformation. Tambo's leadership abilities should be subject to study at UNISA and other institutions. His legacy is a case study that could guide scholars to the pursuit of reclaiming African intellectual futures. Our master's and doctor's students who are present here today, I implore you to consider this aspect of his legacy into your studies and your research. To the Tambo family and our partners at the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, we extend our deepest gratitude for your ongoing collaboration with UNISA. This partnership presents our shared commitments to advancing the values of Tambo that Tambo stood for, and we work together to inspire the next generation of leaders and innovators who will shape Africa's future. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, today is not only about commemorating the past. It is about envisioning a future for Africa that is anchored in justice, integrity, and intellectual progress. I thank you for being part of this meaningful journey. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Doctor, for such a lovely welcome. My name is Nomhle Samantha Ntuli, and I am the co-program director for this lovely and auspicious occasion. Before I introduce our next speaker, who is Liana Hubert, I would like to introduce our panel speakers. Now, I must just highlight that, as in the program, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Lenkabula, was supposed to come and embrace us and provide a welcoming address. But due to other commitments, Liana Hubert, who is the Deputy Registrar of the UNISA, she will be presenting the welcoming address. Now, before she comes on stage, I would like to go through the various bios. And what's also important as well is that I wanted to acknowledge Gogo Aubrey Mashiki, Thokoza Gogo. For those of you who are not familiar with what I have just done, Gogo, usually it would be associated with maternal, but when it comes to, tradition or in the healing world, it's basically very important for us to acknowledge our elders who are embracing our presence. Thokoza. Aubrey Mashiki is a Sangoma and an independent political analyst. Now, going through his bio, it's quite an established biography. He's a financial male-rated political analyst. He's also a senior research associate at the Center of Political Studies in Johannesburg, and that tenure came to an end in March 2011. And what's also important as well is that he's a research fellow at the Helen Suzman Foundation until 2016. What's also important that in 2010, he was also invited as a research fellowship at the Stellenbosch Institute of Advanced Studies. In May 2014, he was also invited at various symposiums at Sweden, London, Egypt, Nigeria, and also locally to speak in honor of Nelson Mandela. And what's also important is that uGogo is a former mathematics, science, and an English teacher, a strategist. He's held various positions, including at the Premier's office, as well as being the spokesperson for the MEC for Education in Gauteng. Gogo holds a degree in history and English literature, and is also a former member of various political parties such as UDF, African National Congress, Umkhonto we Sizwe, specifically the military wing of the ANC, and the South African Communist Party. In South Africa and beyond the borders of South Africa, he writes a monthly column for the Engineering News, and he's also currently writing a book on spirituality and politics. In November 2012, Gogo wrote an e-book called The Zuma Movement and the Road to Mangaung, and it was published and is still available at the Amazon.com and the Kindle book. Thokoza, Gog, Thokoza. Now our next speaker that I would also, or panel that I would also like to, my apologies, a bit of a tongue twister. The next speaker that I would like to read the bio is of Dr. Sithembile Mbete. She is a well-known political scientist, bearing over 15 years of experience in academia, civil society, and government. And I must say, I used to always listen to her, especially, on the radio, sharing her, political views. She's an executive director of the Public Affairs Research Institute, which is an institute that is focusing on building democratic and effective state institutions in South Africa. Dr. Sithembile holds a PhD in international relations from the University of Pretoria, where she's also currently a senior lecturer in the Department of Political Sciences. Prior to her working at the University of Pretoria, she was also a researcher in the Secretariat of the National Planning Commission, which contributed to the drafting of the National Development Plan in the areas of public service reform, anti-corruption policy, and community safety, just to mention a few. Dr. Sithembile comments frequently on a range of political issues in South Africa and even international media, and this would include Financial Times, the New York Times, Al Jazeera, BBC World, CNN, SABC, Newsroom, Voice of America, and others. So the list is endless. And then our last panelist. Thank you. So if you had noted, I started with a hierarchy, starting with our elder, uGogo, Thokoza Gogo, and then went on to Dr. Sithembile. Now we come to our youngest panelist, Mr. Tambo Makwakwa. And I must just mention that I was sitting next to Mr. Makwakwa's mentor, so he, is very excited, and she's also quite excited to be here to witness, Tambo coming on board as one of the panelists. So Tambo Makwakwa is a senior journalist at IOL and a former chief reporter at Daily News. And this is actually a subsidiary of the independent media newspaper. He's a co-founder of the Insider Factor, which is an emerging digital media platform in South Africa. Tambo Makwakwa has published investigative articles. And what is so interesting about these articles is that they expose corruption in both private and the public sector, and is currently expanding his interest to include geopolitics, the global community, and international relations. He holds a degree in human sciences and social services from proudly UNISA, and is a former member of the SRC, or the Student Representative Council, where he served as an undergraduate officer. Thank you so much. And those are our panelists. And I would love to welcome Liana Hubert to come and do the welcoming address and progress by introducing Dr. Sizwe as well.
I first want to say I also love the baby boomers here tonight. At least there are a few baby boomers here, and I hope that Erin can look at this old car and wordsmith that as well a little bit. And thank you very much for the introductions. As indicated, I am Liana Hubert, and I am the Deputy Registrar of UNISA, and it's what a privilege to be here tonight. And I see the lovely mother as well of Sizwe, and be proud, and let's just enjoy this evening together. And then, you know, when I entered tonight, I saw all these beautiful women, and I just think we need to give them a hand of applause. The dresses, the ambiance, everything, it's so absolutely beautiful. I think we need to give, I know it's not Women's Month, but it's just Women's Month. Let's just give all the beautiful women a hand of applause. Program facilitators, Ms. Gloria Sepula and Ms. Nomkle Ntule. Sign language interpreters, Mrs. Kamegelo Ramatlocha and Ms. Ula Dunstan. Dr. Erin O'Dear, thank you very much for the welcoming and setting the scene, Acting Regional Director of Gauteng Region. Keynote speaker, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, lecturer, Wits University. I wish I could say lecturer, UNISA. Okay. Panelist, Dr. Sitimbile Mbeti, Executive Director, Public Affairs Research Institute. Mr. Aubrey Masike, Independent Political Consultant and Author. Dr. Tambo Makwakwa, journalist, not a doctor yet. Okay, but then it's absolutely great news to you now tonight. Nomantemba Tambo, representing the Tambo family. Members of the University Council in attendance here this afternoon. Members of UNISA community, including executives, staff and students. Leaders from various political parties and the business sector. Leaders representing various community organizations and institutions of civil society, student leaderships and UNISA students, and also former SRC here tonight, who are giving me sometimes hard times. Representatives from various institutions of higher learning present here today. Representatives from the various Gauteng, provincial and local government present. Distinguished members of this audience and those following this event, as Erin indicated, through broadcast, YouTube, and various online media. You can see why we are so a bit nervous tonight, né? And invited guests from various media fraternities present, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, esteemed guests, colleagues, and friends. Let me say, good afternoon. This afternoon, as we gather for the 5th Oliver Reginald Tambo Annual Memorial Lecture, I extend, on behalf of the University of South Africa, the University of the Land, I want to add, and the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, a warm and heartfelt welcome to each of you. Today, we are not merely here to commemorate the life of one of our nation's greatest leaders. We are here to reflect deeply on the legacy of Oliver Reginald Tambo and its continued relevance in shaping Africa's intellectual and ethical future. Tambo's influence, rooted in the unwavering commitment to constitutionalism, democracy, and ethical leadership, remains a guiding force as we navigated the challenges and opportunities of our future and time. This is the 5th iteration of the Oliver Reginald Tambo Lecture, which we continue to host due to our shared values that Mr. Tambo emulated. Our theme this afternoon is Legacy in Action, Oliver Tambo's vision and the future of just leadership in South Africa. This theme is both timely and significant, calling us to reimagine the kind of leadership South Africa needs for a just and inclusive future. We have in our midst some of the most distinguished minds whose contribution to this theme we look forward to. I am delighted to welcome the Tambo family and our esteemed partners from the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, represented this afternoon by Ambassador Nomantemba Tambo and Mrs. Natasha Ali, CEO of the Foundation. The partnership between our institutions is a source of great pride to UNISA, and we are committed to strengthening it as we carry forward the flame of knowledge, justice, and progress, inspired by the indomitable spirit of Oliver Reginald Tambo. This year, we acknowledge that would have been Mr. Tambo's 108th birthday, and we continue to celebrate his enduring dedication to the cause of justice, equality, and the pursuit of freedom continues to serve as an internal wellspring of inspiration for all of us. We are highly honored to have our keynote speaker, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, who is a lecturer at the University of the Witwatersrand. We are proud that he is also an alumnus of UNISA, having obtained his LLB here at our institution. Dr. Walsh Mpofu has the distinct honor of being in the same league as our prominent alumnus, Mr. Oliver Reginald Tambo, who completed his law degree at our institution. Our university could not have chosen a more fitting voice to engage us today as the keynote speaker on the theme which I've already elaborated on. As a scholar, author, podcaster, musician, activist, and social commentator, Dr. Mpofu-Walsh consistently challenged us to think critical about the future of democracy, justice, and leadership in our country. Following the keynote, we look forward to drawing on the wisdom of an exceptional panel of respondents and discussants who will be introduced later. I think we've already introduced them, so we're not going to have a later introduction. Dr. Sizwe Mpofu, as indicated, Executive Director at the Public Affairs Research. Mr. Tambo Makwakwa, Senior Journalist at AOL. And Mr. Obi Mashike, Independent Political Consultant and Author. Together, these voices will provide us with a rich, multifaceted discussion, one that honors the past, interrogates the present, and envisions the future of just leadership in South Africa. I also warmly welcome our distinguished partners and guests, whose presence adds meaning to this gathering. As a university, UNISA remains committed to be a beacon of academic excellence, advancing intellectual rigor and ethical leadership across the African continent. Recently, UNISA has honored to serve as the seat of the first National Convention of the National Dialogue of South Africa, a historic platform dedicated to rebuilding, reconnecting, and reclaiming the South African promise of a democratic state that is rooted in the respect of human dignity and equality, that also attentive to the needs of the citizens and ensuring that the economic, social, and cultural rights are realized. Mr. Oliver Reginald Tambo fought for a new dispensation that is led by honorable and ethical leadership. The theme of the lecture today shines a spotlight in just leadership. The question must be asked whether South Africa has just leadership at this juncture of our democracy. Are we led by the type of leadership Mr. Tambo and his peers represented and modeled for us as a country? I look forward to a robust discussion and a debate on this theme today. Creating platforms like the OR Tambo Lecture is one of the many ways in which our university realizes its vision of being a truly African university, shaping futures in the service of humanity. UNISA's commitment to education, research, and innovation continues to be recognized globally. Our consistent rise in international rankings, particularly the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, demonstrate our contribution to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These achievements reflect not only the dedication of our academics, but also the visionary leadership of Professor Puleng Lenkabula, University's Principal and Vice-Chancellor, in steering the university towards becoming a truly impactful and caring African institution. These accolades affirm our commitment to quality education, gender equality, and strong institutions, values championed by Oliver Tambo. They also highlight UNISA's catalytic niche areas that are essential in shaping Africa's intellectual and ethical futures. This year's lecture also highlights the importance of nurturing the next generation. The choice of a younger keynote speaker, alongside the prioritization on and inclusion of our masters and doctoral students, reflect our commitment to putting action behind the words, young people are the future. We acknowledge the presence and contribution of our SRC structures, who play a vital role in amplifying the voice of students and ensuring that the values of participation, accountability, and inclusive leadership remain at the center of the university community. It is now my greatest honor. We've been waiting for this the whole afternoon. It is now my greatest honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh. Yes, let's give it a very, very good hand of applause. And he is extremely charming, so by the way. He holds a DPhil in International Relations from the University of Oxford and is a lecturer in the Department of International Relations of its university. He completed an LLB degree from UNISA in 2024. I just need to say that. His first book, Democracy and Delusion, 10 Myths in South African Politics, published in 2017. Just amazing how young he was. And he won the City Press Tafelberg Non-Fiction Award. Can't we just give him a hand of applause for that? The book was accompanied by a rap album of the same name. His second book, The New Apartheid, published 2021, was one of the best-selling books in South Africa that year. He has been described by the author Mark Gesvisser as one of the finest writers of his generation. In broadcasting, Mpofu-Walsh hosted the primetime current affairs show Unfiltered on SABC in 2023. He is the founder of the popular current affairs YouTube channel, I hope I'm saying SMWX, with over 250,000 subscribers. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and join me in welcoming Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh to the podium.
Dr. Mpofu, if I may humbly request that you just a little briefly, yes, my humblest apologies. We would like to call upon the choir to grace us with just one musical item as a stage opener for you, Dr. Mpofu. Thank you so much. So immediately afterwards, when they're done, you're more than welcome to grace us on the stage. Thank you.
I think we need water also here.
Applause. Program directors, I return you many thanks, and to the Tambo family, Auntie Tembi, to members of the academic staff here, my fellow academic colleagues, the Tambo Foundation, and my parents. I must also tell you a funny story as I mentioned the Tambo family and my parents. The other day someone stopped me and they said, "I know you." And I said, okay, now I know what's coming. And they said, "You are Dali Tambo's son." So I said, no, it's the other Dali, but yeah. So I suppose it's only fitting that I should be delivering this lecture here. We're gathered here today to reflect on the life of Oliver Tambo and his vision, but also the future of just leadership in South Africa. Now, Tambo's life is a life that is dazzling and extensive in its sheer scale and scope. From student to teacher, from teacher to lawyer, from lawyer to activist, from activist to freedom fighter, from freedom fighter to commander-in-chief of a revolutionary army, and diplomat, and exiled leader, and finally to Shakespearean returning hero. So with a life that extends across such breadth, it is impossible to reflect on it in its full complexity. So today, I've chosen to focus on 3 key aspects of Tambo's life and legacy that I believe are particularly relevant for our times, and indeed for the future of leadership in South Africa. Those are, firstly, Tambo as a radical critic, someone who is unafraid to tell the truth and to call a thing, particularly a radical critic of apartheid. Secondly, I'd like to reflect on Tambo as a lawgiver, as someone who played a fundamental role in shaping the law of South Africa, particularly in birthing the South African Constitution. And finally, I'd like to reflect on Tambo's legacy as a statesman and an international relations actor, someone who was able to balance between tricky tides of geopolitics, balance between East and a warring West, understand the complexities of Africa, the United Nations, and traverse all of those difficult grounds towards building a South Africa and its liberation foreign policy that ultimately met the needs of the passage to democracy in South Africa. In sum, then, I believe it's important for us to extract from Tambo's legacy both the capacity to radically criticize, but then to do the work of radically building after we have criticized. And Tambo is an exemplar of both the capacity to radically critique and to creatively reimagine. So let's talk about the radical critique, because it bears calling to mind Tambo's words themselves. As I've prepared for this lecture, I've been immersed in the archive of Tambo's speeches, his readings, his interviews, and his documents. I've spoken to people who I look up to and trust who came across Tambo and his legacy. And one thing that stands out is just how unapologetically he was prepared and unwaveringly he was prepared to criticize the apartheid system. It may seem obvious now, but at the time, few were able to mount as unwavering a criticism, and we know the consequences. But have a look at this. In a speech at Georgetown University in the US in 1987, Tambo said, to end the violence in our country and in Southern Africa as a whole means one thing and one thing only. The apartheid system has to be liquidated. It must be ended in its entirety. Correctly categorized by the international community as a crime against humanity, no part of the system can or should be left intact. A crime cannot be reformed or amended. It either is or it is not. It cannot be made tolerable by changes to any of the elements that make up its totality. Firstly, you witness the incredible intellect, the rhetorical ability, but the unwavering moral certitude and the refusal to entertain any compromise to the absolute liquidation of apartheid. What a refreshing corrective to the mealy-mouthed compromises which we have become so used to swallowing. In the mid-1980s, in an interview with the New African magazine, Tambo reaffirmed this golden thread that no aspect of apartheid could be tolerated, not even a small ounce. He said, "We aim to defeat and destroy the fascist regime, and not to reform apartheid, or to make our oppression less reprehensible." And a final glimpse into this unwavering stand, an uncompromising stance, came in an interview, again in the crucial mid to late 1980s, again in the United States. Jim Lehrer, a very well-known journalist who hosts what is currently now known as PBS NewsHour, hosted Tambo and an American senator in a debate about violence in South Africa. And listen to his response to the question which tried to put him on the back foot. Jim Lehrer says, "Mr. Tambo, the Minister of Law and Order said today that your organization is working at making South Africa ungovernable and uncontrollable. Is that true, Mr. Tambo?" Oliver Tambo: "It is true. We are the victims of a crime. The government is carrying on a crime, perpetuating a crime on our people. We have an obligation to stop the crime, to stop the operation of the apartheid system by making it unworkable. We have no alternative to that. We are obliged, we are duty-bound to do whatever we can to free ourselves of this crime." I think Mr. Lehrer moved on to another topic after that. These glimpses of Tambo's political thought reveal a mind that was incisive, that was insightful, but that was ultimately able to arrive at a moral conclusion and defend a position to the hilt. Something that is so refreshing, something that we require of leadership in our country today. The capacity to be candid, to be honest, to be open, and not to lie to the people. To stand firm on a principle, no matter who tries to knock you off that principle. And if there's one thing, or the first thing I believe we should distill from Tambo's legacy, is that capacity to stand firm, to radically criticize the status quo. But Tambo didn't stop there. Because it's one thing to radically criticize the status quo, and it's an important thing to do. It's an important thing to do now. But he also did the hard work of crafting and imagining an alternative to that status quo. and becoming one of the chief lawgivers of the subsequent South African society. Now, a little known fact, on the north and south walls of the United States Supreme Court, there are marble frieze statues of the great lawgivers of human history. Figures like the Babylonian lawmaker Hammurabi, Moses, Solon, Draco, where the word draconian comes from, the unrelenting ancient lawgiver. The Prophet Muhammad, yes, in the US Supreme Court. Napoleon. And I would venture that were the US Supreme Court to recraft the north and south walls, they should add another important lawgiver, Tambo. Because it's one thing to practice the law. And make no mistake, Tambo practiced the law brilliantly as the first black South African, along with Mandela, to found a partnership of black lawyers in Johannesburg. A funny thing, I was reading In Our Lifetime by Eleanor Sisulu, and Walter Sisulu is asked, did Mandela and Tambo ever actually get legal permission to practice in Johannesburg at the time? And Sisulu said, no, I don't think they did. So Tambo was a brilliant practitioner of law. Everyone from George Bezos to Sidney Kentridge spoke about how fastidious he was, how thorough he was, and how he was able to even use apartheid law and the common law to secure small victories for black people at that time. But he was more than a lawyer or a legal practitioner, because towards the mid-1980s, he became a lawgiver, someone who imagines a just law for a new society. In 1985, at the ANC's Watershed Consultative Conference in Kabwe, Tambo did something paradoxical. Firstly, he stood up in front of the delegates and he said that terrible but cleansing fires would be required in revolutionary war to take South Africa to peace. In other words, terrible and cleansing fires through revolutionary war were all that would be able to get us to peace. So he intensified the armed struggle. But at the same time, that conference issued an instruction for a constitutional committee to be set up to imagine the constitution of a peaceful, democratic South Africa. Radically critiquing on the one hand and radically building on the other hand. We may think those look like contradictory positions, but they were just an illustration of Tambo's capacity to both extremely fight the system and think through how to rebuild that system. So the armed struggle was intensified, but the constitutional project was also intensified. And the Constitutional Committee, which Tambo established, was really one of the fundamental kernels of what would become the South African Constitution. But I would go a step further, because I would say that the constitution that Tambo was envisaging was a better constitution than the one we even got. Sadly, Tambo passed away at a critical juncture in our country when constitutional negotiations were at a pivotal state. And in some ways, the constitutional dream dreamt up by Tambo got diverted a little. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to give you a sense of Tambo's constitution, because this was the preamble to Tambo's constitution. In his brilliant book, Andre Odendaal, UWC historian, has traced back the Constitutional Committee and their work. And he has found early drafts of the preamble that was supposed to make up the South African Constitution. So let's see what Tambo's preamble sounded like. Draft 1, 8 to the 14th of January 1986. South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of all the people. Freedom Charter nod, quite similar to where we are with our preamble. South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Then it goes on. Only a democratic state based on the will of all the people can secure all their birthright without distinction of color, race, sex, or belief. It continues. Grants to the oppressed majority their national rights. Grants to the oppressed majority their national rights. But just wait. Outlaws racial discrimination in all its forms. By the way, there's no such clause in our preamble today. We have an equality clause. It continues. Ensures the complete dismantlement of apartheid structures and their replacement by democratic ones. The word apartheid does not feature in the current South African Constitution. Prevents the resurgence of racist policies and programs, whether in their old form or new ones. Overcomes the effects of centuries of racial domination and inequality by ensuring a substantial redistribution of wealth and the complete opening up of access to facilities for all. That was Tambo's Constitution. And somewhere along the line, while we retained a lot of that progress, and I don't mean to overlook the important gains made by the constitutional dispensation, we lost the radical revisioning of society that was contained in those early drafts of what the new South Africa was meant to be. So Tambo was no radical analyst alone. He was a remaker of South African society, and he was in the process of remaking South African laws and constitutional law in our country. The problem that we face today, in large part, is that we have lost that same political imagination to rethink our country and to break free of old assumptions and to try something new. It was Nietzsche who said, a snake that cannot cast its skin perishes. So too with those minds who are prevented from changing their views. They cease to be minds. What we can learn from Tambo as we try to reimagine the future is that we must be bold in our political imagination, and we must not allow the melodrama of today's pantomime news cycle to narrow our gaze, because we can still reimagine what reconstituting South Africa might look like. We might even start the early work towards thinking of what a new republic that takes the lessons of the old republic and builds on them further might look like. That would be Tambo's legacy. And of course, finally, and thirdly, we've spoken about his radical critique. We've spoken about his capacity as a lawgiver. We come to his ability as a statesman. Let's wrap our minds around this. Remember, the Cold War is raging. The Soviet Union and the United States are at loggerheads. And Tambo manages to navigate from exile an ability to communicate eventually by the end of the 1980s with Washington, with London, and yes, with Western capitals. Of course, he lives much of his life, or he lives an important portion of his life in London. He also is in dialogue with the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe at the time. He then manages to straddle Africa, not only in the frontline states, but building unity across the continent, which, by the way, is also afflicted by the Cold War at the time. He then penetrates the United Nations, playing a key role in the Special Committee Against Apartheid and forging anti-apartheid sentiment in the United Nations. This is a diplomatic achievement, an unparalleled diplomatic achievement. Would that we could have someone in this global moment of rivalries between East and West, North and South, bickering on the African continent. Would that we could have someone who could put the South African people's interests at the center and negotiate with every pole of the global order so that we could achieve further liberation. That's what Tambo would demand of us. Not to say we're not speaking to anyone, we would speak to everyone. And we should speak to everyone. But we would stand firm on certain principles while speaking to everyone. Whether those principles are the plight of the Palestinian people in the war on Gaza, or whether those principles are domestic at home, and the refusal to waver on the need for gender justice or racial justice in our country. We can have a foreign policy that stays true to those principles while balancing the different power blocks in the world for the interests of South Africa. We just need to find it through the legacy of Tambo. So Tambo was able to criticize radically and build radically. And it all really comes down to one question. Can we build a just South Africa? I don't mean these flimsy definitions of justice where we're talking about court procedures, or the hollow version of justice where both sides get to be heard. Can we build a just South Africa? That is the question that Tambo's legacy is calling out to us at the moment. That legacy won't be built through PR exercises or dialogues. It may be built through dialogue. It will be built by going through terrible and cleansing fires of reckoning with the horror of our society and of dragging ourselves through the difficult decisions that have to be made so that we can pass through those terrible but cleansing fires. And we can recover. There was a lot of skepticism about foundations coming together to chart a way forward. But I do think there is one thing that can be recovered from the process of dialogue. Why don't we just have a national action or agree on a national policy or a national step that we all want to take, rather than just a national place where we first discuss what we're going to do and then wait until we figure what that is. Let's just choose one thing that all the foundations could come together behind, that society could come together behind, that academia could come together behind, that politicians and economists. Let's find one thing and do it, and then see what happens after that. Maybe that is something we can salvage from the process of our society coming together to try and find each other. We are a country of raw and untended traumas, lurking just beneath the surface. Tambo's hometown is one of the worst run municipalities in our country. 8 in 10 South Africans say they believe the country is going in the wrong direction. 8 in 10. But it's rare that you find a statistic that brings a tear to your eye. But this one nearly did for me. 70% of South African children live in poverty. 70% of South African children live in poverty as we speak. The numbers have just lurched upwards. Now we can quibble about how you define the poverty line and what's enough money to make sure that you have food in your mouth at the end of the month. But how is it that we allow 7 out of 10 children in our country to feel like they don't have enough 30 years after the so-called miracle of democracy in South Africa? So it's these difficult questions and these difficult truths which we must call to mind as we remember the legacy of Tambo and his capacity to speak the truth unapologetically, but call society to build and reimagine itself as we speak those truths. And so, in the spirit of Tambo, may we pass through those terrible but cleansing fires, find the courage to radically criticize the status quo, but also find the competence and the imagination to reimagine our society thereafter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been told that we are going to have 10 minutes to give our responses. And then, thank you so much for that real provocation. And I think there's something very appropriate about us having this lecture and that provocation. And for me, having been here, what is it now, 3 weeks ago for the National Convention, and the dialoguing. And I suppose my remarks, and let me make sure that I don't overindulge, and so that I speak for the right amount of time, is that my remarks are really going to focus on Tambo's leadership. And I, when we had spoken about how you were going to focus on today and the 3 points, and I think that it's such an important thing. I want to repeat them. Firstly, this idea of Tambo as a radical critic. The second, the idea of him as a radical builder and lawgiver. The third, then, him as a statesman and IR actor. I think, the frame, firstly, that the framing of Tambo's leadership within those three frames, I think, is such a critical one, because we learn about him very much in relation to the ANC as a movement and his role in keeping the ANC in exile together, longest president, etc. And then that kind of ends his story. Once 1994 starts, Tambo's story ends. And I think that what you have done with this lecture is reframe him and recenter him into the imagination, the shaping of the South Africa that we have today, and how critical that role of building, of imagining the after was in the leadership of the ANC in exile. Because we don't, and this is something that I think we are missing in the conversation of crisis that we're having now, both in South Africa but globally. The old world is ending, the new is not yet born. As Zizek would say, this isn't a Gramsci. So the Gramsci quote is, the old world is ending, the new is not yet born. And then Zizek adds, now is the time for monsters. And we're so obsessed with the time for monsters that we're not thinking about the fact that this time, this mess, is the time for imagining of what comes next. That the new world is not just born, it's conceived. It's created, it's imagined. And I think that what you've reminded us so critically of is the role of ethical leadership in guiding our imagining. And I think that's really important. I think that that's the first big takeaway that I want to highlight from your contribution, because what I think that we're missing in South Africa at the present is that bold leadership to reimagine, which is why we keep recycling the same actors. So Auntie Helen's going to be the mayor of Joburg. To fix it. It's the same people that we keep recycling in this imagination of ours, and the same solutions for a radically changed and different world. And so the reminder to imagine boldly, to imagine radically, I think is a very important one. The second point that I want to make is a somewhat more controversial one, and that deviates slightly, is that in as much as, and I agree, that Tambo was a radical critic who criticized very forcefully and with great moral authority the apartheid regime, he was also a really powerful bridge builder. And I guess this isn't really a critique more than a quibble, that although he had a very strong moral stance and criticism of the apartheid regime, he dealt with criticism within the ANC in really constructive ways, and ways of dealing with criticism that I think we've lost in this country under democracy, both within the kind of the big part, you can't really call the governing party anymore because it's not governing on its own. But within the ANC, but I think just in our body politic as a whole. Because one of the biggest tragedies, I think, that the dialogue convention, all of the drama displayed, is just the complete immaturity of our governing elite, past and present, in not being able to get to people with each other's phone numbers, not being able to get it together to fight out whatever it is you need to fight out, and pull yourselves together to organize, to lead society. It's extraordinary to me, and I don't think that we've probed that enough, how much the mess of the beginning of this dialogue, whether you agree with dialogues or not, is a deep elite failure. And that should terrify all of us. Because if the people with elites, if the elites of the country, who are the leaders of the state, of different civil society groupings, of business, of the church, could not get it together to negotiate over the putting on of an event, that's terrifying. And in preparation for this lecture, I went back to read what Chris Hani said about Tambo. Because Hani, in the 1960s, given the failures and really being left in the lurch of MK soldiers, been a number of missions over the border, in Rhodesia trying to get into South Africa, led a group of young MK soldiers in deep criticism against the leadership of the ANC. And he said, and I quote, "We blurted out, we blew our tops, and some leaders got angry. I think people generally were not used to being criticized. They thought that we were going to just applaud everything that they did and say hallelujah. I think the leadership at the time was not ready for criticism." But then he talks about how Tambo was different to that. He had no inferiority complex. He never felt that he was being abused or his dignity was being impugned or that he was being attacked. He felt that he was leading a movement, and he remained there as a leader by being an interpreter, an implementer of collective decisions, decisions which came from a number of levels throughout the movement. He goes on to talk about how when he was a young soldier in Tanzania initially, and then in Zambia, that O.R. Tambo spent a lot of time in the camps of MK so he could actually understand the problems of the army. So he spent a lot of time speaking to his own rank and file and taking their views, their opinions, and shaping the action and the decisiveness that he then would show. And that ability of leaders to listen to what they hear from the lowest, from the most lowly among them, and to actually be influenced by what they hear, to act in the interest of the collective, is something that's sorely missing in our body politic today. And that I think that, so much of the provocation that you've given us, Sizwe, to have a national action. Part of having the national action is that we don't have leaders that can listen and that can take advice for what that action should be. So the dialoguing is a necessary thing. What's missing is that step from the dialogue, between the dialogue and the action of interpreting, of integrating, and of bringing together all of what comes together into then a collective action. And that important role of leadership that Oliver Tambo showed so incredibly and just demonstrated in ways that even his critics admired throughout his long leadership of the ANC is something that's sorely missing today. And then finally, I want to say that his role as a statesman, I wrote my doctorate, I wrote my PhD on South Africa's time in the UN Security Council, its first 2 elected terms after 1994. And the first research visit I made to the UN, I met a number of older UN Secretariat staffers who knew Tambo and who spoke so highly of him as being one of the best diplomats they'd ever engaged with as Secretariat staffers of the UN, even though he did not hold an official diplomatic position as the leader of a liberation movement at the UN, and who praised the leadership that he displayed in so many of the tough negotiations that they were involved in, not as somebody who represented a government, but as somebody who represented a people. And I think what's the big lesson, I think, to take, and that I take as an international relations scholar from Tambo's internationalism, is that we're going to reshape the international or the global. I don't think the term international is going to make sense in a few years, but that we're going to reshape the world through people to people relations and people's ability to engage with each other and to engage with governments as people, rather than through these big state institutions, because it's those very state institutions whose logics are unjust and that recreate these poles and this bipolarity instead of being able to operate within the multipolar. And so there is something, I think, that was a really useful reminder about the kind of diplomacy, the kind of approach to the world that is required at this moment. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Tambo. And I must disclose just before I begin with the discussion here that, you know, I would usually be sitting the other side, having to actually observe and, of course, make notes of what these amazing speakers are saying. And today, I am right here having to speak after the great minds that actually spoke right now. It is frightening, I must say. Yeah, but as a journalist, I think it is befitting of me to begin by stating the fact that it is such an honor, a privilege to speak here this afternoon, this evening. And I know very well that colleagues in other parts of the world do not enjoy the freedom of having to sit in front of the masses and actually reflect on issues that are happening around the world. I'm speaking of Gaza, for example, where we are actually, you know, observing an extermination of people, a whole population of 2 million that is under threat. We need not to forget those people. And as just Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh was speaking here, he said to us, he reminded us of how good and, you know, Oliver Tambo was such a leader, a radical one for that matter, who was not really scared of confronting issues that are facing our world. He did so using various ways of actually reaching out to people. Mpofu-Walsh reminds us that while leading in exile, he was able to actually bring together people from different parts of the world in trying to find solutions into our world. And I think this discussion today sort of brings us very close to such integrity that was displayed by O.R. Tambo in ensuring that the world becomes a better place in which we can all live and exist peacefully. My take from this discussion today is very important as a young person. As a young person, a young leader, a writer, a person who carries the voices of the masses, because it is important to teach the legacy of O.R. Tambo in a true way that it is, in a true way that also reflect the sacrifices that Tambo actually did in order to make sure that we get to enjoy and sit here and, you know, be part and parcel of this democracy. We also must be mindful of the fact that governance is actually collapsing in the country. And maybe one of the compelling questions that we really need to come up with here today is, as citizens, what is it that we're doing? Are we just sitting by, watching government officials doing as they please? Of course, we're not politicians, but we're people with brains. We can think, we have voices. And I'm very glad today that one of my mentors, who actually taught me to be as radical as I was when I was still young, and I would like to believe that even in my career as a journalist, I still try to ensure that a bit of radicalism is brought into journalism, because as a young person, as a young leader, we cannot be afraid to speak about the issues that are going on. The judiciary is collapsing. And it pains me today when I have to sit here in front of you speaking, because then I'm also very careful and, you know, how I structure the conversation, because it may be used against me when I write an article in the future. However, it really pains me today to actually see corruption that is so rife, and that even when a whistleblower comes forward, there is nothing that can be done. Because the very same people that are entrusted with processes, with ensuring that, you know, independent oversight is also carried out, are somewhat involved. Now that compelling question comes back again. What would have Tambo done today? How would he have acted when the world is becoming what it is today? So it is important for us to actually have these ongoing discussions, reflecting on the lives and the life and times of Oliver Tambo, and draw lessons as to what is it that we can take and learn from him in order to fix our world. You know, yesterday I was attending a memorial lecture, an annual memorial lecture hosted at UJ, and Dr. Naledi Pandey was the speaker. She then challenges us during the talk that we need to start shifting our mindset. She says to us, we need to start thinking, of course, in line with how and what the world looks like today. But that doesn't mean that we should actually, you know, forget our principles that have kept us together, that have built this democracy, that have united the world. It means that we need to look back at Tambo and say, what would he have done? Tambo, as a teacher, as a lawyer, as a politician, was able to actually go everywhere, speak to everyone, things that we ought to do today. So being invited here today really gives me a pleasure to come and share my thoughts, and also to thank Dr. Mpofu-Walsh for that very moving lecture. It was not just a lecture, it was a masterclass. Thank you very much.
Kamakwini, Thokozani. Before I roast the young man I call Uhlubi for his excellent lecture, let me start by thanking Liana, who started by telling us how beautiful we look. Thank you, Liana, for complimenting me on my dress. Then I have advice for Dr. Nodia. We are told is a runner. I have two things to say to Dr. Nodia. First of all, show a bit more confidence in public transport. Secondly, advice on exercise, Dr. Nadir. When you feel the urge to exercise, lie down until it passes and you'll be fine. Subi, thank you. Siyabulela for your excellent lecture. I am certain, Nogokba, Tatomkhulu, your grandfather, and those he is with, uthembekile. Nomakhulu wakho, uMamdolo, and those she is with are very proud of you, where they are. Uhlubi, you call him Sizwe, I call him Hlubi. He's a young man I respect quite deeply. and as an older member of the Gen Z generation, a young man that I've learned a lot from over the years since I started engaging with him in 2019. He is a young man I have become very proud of. Siyabulela Hlubi. And then uMakhumalo. Siyabulela Makhumalo. uMakhumalo herself is a young woman I am very proud of, given the fact that the first time I met uMakhumalo, I was in the Premier's office in the strategy unit, and we worked with her father, who called himself, and therefore we called him Ohoho. And uMakhumalo was this tall in those days. And here we are on the same panel. Isabulela Makhumalo. And then Utabo, here next to me. The last time I saw him, he had come to interview me for an episode of their podcast, Inside Factor. And I remember that what trended after that episode was posted is what I predicted, the coming of fires in South Africa and what they would mean. And of course, Uhlubi talks about Oliver Tambo, referring to the cleansing fire of revolution. But before I get into the roast proper, my wife asked me to apologize right at the beginning before I start. As a strong African man, I will not disobey her. So here's my apology. I am going to say things that may offend some of us. Let me assure you, it is not my intention to offend. That said, because we're at a university, I am going to try to sound clever. But before I make that attempt, there can be no justice, because Uhlubi, in his lecture, talks about Tambo's leadership legacy as a legacy of justice. There can be no justice in any society in which more than half of the population is discriminated against. I am talking about women. There is no society that can reach its potential as long as women are discriminated against. Therefore, there is no society, including ours, that can reach its leadership potential when women are discriminated against. Because it means, as a society, we rely on a smaller or on a small portion of the population as the source of our leadership. And therefore, we are not going to reach our leadership potential as long as women are discriminated against. Therefore, when we think about the future of leadership in this country, and when you think about the leadership legacy of O.R. Tambo, it cannot be that we do so without acknowledging the leadership potential that is locked in the act of discriminating against women. Now, one of the things I do when I listen to a lecture is to ask whether such a lecture ignites in me, triggers in me thoughts that are not in the lecture itself. And if such a lecture triggers thoughts that are not in the lecture itself, to me, that is a sign that the lecture was excellent. And so was the case with the lecture delivered by Uhlubi today. Here are some of the thoughts Uhlubi triggered in me. Uhlubi talks about Tambo's constitution and reads the preamble of Tambo's constitution. And the thought Uhlubi triggered in me is that we must commit ourselves as a country to revisiting and rewriting our constitution after every generation. That is the first thought triggered by Uhlubi in me. Secondly, he takes me back to the colonial matrix of power. Two things underpin the colonial matrix of power: racism and patriarchy. Now remember that the colonial matrix of power is buttressed by a particular logic, a logic we refer to as coloniality. A logic which says those who are not white men are ontologically and epistemologically inferior. Those who are not white men are those who are black, and those who are women. Now, of course, there's a hierarchy here. At the top of the hierarchy is God. Below God, the white man. Below the white man, the black man. And right at the bottom, the black woman. But what the white woman and the black woman share in common is that, according to the logic of coloniality, which buttresses the colonial matrix of power, is the fact that both black and white women are not human. Or, to the extent that they are human, they are not as human as men, black or white. Another thought that Uhlubi triggered in me is that I should remind you that the struggle against apartheid colonialism was not a struggle for democracy, particularly liberal democracy. The struggle against apartheid colonialism was a struggle for freedom. And democracy is one of the means by which we achieve freedom. Furthermore, the struggle was a struggle aimed at rehumanizing those who were dehumanized by apartheid colonialism. When it comes to women and what we have done to them, the struggle was a struggle to humanize, not even to rehumanize them, to humanize them, given the fact that at no point in history have we regarded women as human, or have we treated them as human. To the extent that the struggle continues, it is a struggle about humanizing women. And one of the ways in which we must humanize them is to make sure that the content of what we call justice must include the imperative of making sure that the leadership we need in this society must be leadership that we source from and resides in those who are women. The final thought that will be triggered in me is this. Ubuntu. There is a need to reconceptualize Ubuntu, which is a quality that O.R. Tambo had in abundance, which is a quality that informed his radical vision for this country. But it's a quality that we must reconceptualize. Ubuntu must not just mean you are or I am because you are. We must extend that to nature too, which means you look at a tree, you look at a plant, you look at an animal, and you extend Ubuntu to it and you say, I am because you are. And therefore, our idea and practice of leadership must be rooted in that kind of reconceptualized Ubuntu as something that you extend not only to those who are human, you extend to nature and beyond. Because you say to nature, I am because you are. Lastly, history is a ceaseless repetition of error, folly, and correction. Therefore, history is a ceaseless repetition of the errors and folly of men. It is high time that we commit ourselves to the emergence of leadership in our society that will come from women. We must honor the legacy of Oliver Tambo by saying all of us must embrace the feminine. Embrace the feminine divine wisdom. Meaning, as we see the emergence of a new consciousness on our planet and beyond, it is time to allow ourselves to be led by those amongst us who are women, and give ourselves the opportunity to benefit from the divine feminine wisdom. Therefore, the 21st century, we must declare, is the century of the woman and her leadership, is the century of the divine feminine wisdom. This we must do in honor of Oliver Tambo's legacy. Kamako.
My profound thanks to all the panelists for stimulating interventions and extending on the provocation. I remind the audience that this is also going to be released on the SMWX podcast. Tambo, maybe we should dual release it on Insight Factor as well. So now we're going to ask if anyone in the audience has a question or a comment. I watched a recent panel that I thought was really interesting. The author Teju Ko was on the panel and he said, it's okay to make a comment as well. You don't just have to ask a question. However, please keep it relatively brief so that we can accommodate a few different people if you have something to say. So we're opening it up to the audience, and you can make a comment or a question. Then what we're going to do, because we appreciate that you've all been attentive for a very long time, is we will all just take 1 or 2 minutes to give our thoughts on the comments or questions that have been made. The floor is open. I believe there was a question on that side. This young person, yes, I believe so. Over here, yes. And let's start with those two then. Is there a mic to Rove?
Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Lufunoti Chikarange. I'm originally from a village in Venda, but I'm stuck in Pretoria because I need to work. Thank you so much, Dr. Mpofu-Walsh, for your thought-provoking lecture. I honestly didn't know much about Oliver Tambo until today, and I'm wondering where I will be doing my PhD research on some of his constitutionalism. I want to agree with you. Personally, I don't think that the national dialogue will bring us much assistance. And I'm wondering if this forum has the authority to make suggestions or recommendations to the powers that be, because I just think that the minimum resources we have are not necessarily being used appropriately. It's not like we don't know what's wrong, and we don't need almost R1 billion to confirm what we already know is confirmed. My question is, in terms of ethical leadership, Mr. Tambo did say I think governance is collapsing. No, it has collapsed. and we don't have ethical leadership. So my question is, how do we correct ourselves in line with what Oliver Tambo would have imagined? Thank you. Oh, I forgot to say I am a researcher. I do cyber law at Oreza Consulting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and hello to the panelists. And my question is more of a question and a comment at the same time, so it's multi-tiered. I think we live in a society where the society itself has eroded a bit, so it's reflective in the leadership as well, because we do not know where we are spearheading the country. In a world that is changing, you have your AIs, you have your additive manufacturing. The foundation of what we call the society we know is being pulled from our feet. So we're in a situation where most of the leadership are old, they don't know what to do, hence the national dialogue to steer the conversation to the people that, hey, you guys are young, you guys know a thing or two about what's emerging, so how are you going to go about defining what the future is and what type of future we want to live in? And since today is about legacy, speaking on Oliver Tambo's legacy, I guess it's a situation of what legacy are we trying to find in leadership, and how are we going to go about crafting a future? Because as one of you guys said, there's high unemployment, high poverty. So to solve those issues, it's more of a wealth thing. How do we build wealth as a country? How do we go from a country that has a GDP of 300 billion to in the north of trillions? So it's about how do we build wealth and how do we define how we build wealth? Because as much as we'd like to say, hey, let's live in a multicultural society, let's love each other, kumbaya, most of the problems that come about is because of resources. And the less resources there are, the less kind we are to each other, the more we are like fighting for a place in society. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Nomhle Nduli, the co-program director. I'm also a research student here at UNISA. Thank you so much, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, for such a thought-provoking lecture. Dr. Stembile, Tabo, and Gogo, we truly appreciate your inputs as well. My question / comment is directed at Ugogo. Dr. Stembile mentioned something very significant, and I think all of us are aware. Corruption is thriving. It is thriving beautifully, but in a bad way. I mean, if you look at the news and everything, so much wastage, so much corruption, justice is lacking. Even you, Tabo, you mentioned, there's so much injustice. And with you, Gogo, you mentioned something very significant, discrimination. There's so much discrimination, first starting with, the racial issues, gender, disability, and not forgetting ageism. I mean, nowadays we have initiatives, or there are initiatives that are being provided, but if you look at opportunities, this would be for the youth. And it's quite interesting, Dr. Sizwe, you've just gone past the youth. So some opportunities might not be applicable to you. But then how do we fix this? Because there is so much injustice, and the theme for this lecture is about just leadership. How do we fix all of this? Is it fixable? Like looking at, I don't know, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, what are your thoughts, Gokov, especially from your side? Because so far it's a very thought-provoking subject. I think for now, let me pack it. Thank you.
Greetings, all protocols observed. My name is Tepi Morova Mashiro, and recently I just turned 18, and on that day, the first thing that I thought was currently adding my name into the percentage of people in South Africa, actually women in South Africa, that are about to be unemployed, that are about to be a hashtag. I feel like that's my most biggest fear, being part of a hashtag in South Africa, either because of gender-based violence or something else could have happened to me out on the streets. And today we are here because of OR Tambo, and I'm getting knowledge about that, stuff I didn't know about. But I just feel like every single year we are getting educated about people and past past leaders of South Africa, and all we ever say is they could have, would have, didn't, and if they were here they could have, but they didn't because they are not here right now. But we keep on having hope in the future leaders. We had hope on Zuma, but he disappointed us. We're having hope on Ramaphosa, and he's disappointing us. And I feel like we're going to continue having hope and not doing anything about our hope, just continue just taking our votes wherever that they are in the ANC, even though we can see that it's corrupt. And our grandparents are also having hope. We are in a different form. And as a woman and as a young lady in South Africa, I feel like this country isn't going anywhere. It isn't. We're just sitting and stating facts, but we're doing nothing about it. And it's going to continue like that until the next generation, until we decide to come together, to unite, and to make decisions about our futures together. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the audience. I think that's the last question, and in the interest of time, we probably have to move on. Is there another one? No, I think that's all. Great. Okay. Well, I think in the interest of time, I'm also mindful that we need to stick to the program. Shall we take one more, or shall we? Okay, we'll take one last one. And apologies to this table, but we can always continue the conversations after this as we interact and network. If you could please keep your remarks brief.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tato Mazwe Madibo. I am a student of power. Quickly to the question, tonight is a very dangerous night. And it's dangerous because the throw of ideas and the identity of being anaclectic. Anaclectic is the process of ideas upon ideas. It's subjective to the praise of the mass community. And my question is, how do we reform the institutionality of thought to spark radical movement as we move in to a new era for our country? I think this is a mass question for the entire panel rather than one particular one. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mazwe. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your comments. And of course, we won't have time to go through them exhaustively, but they are part of the overall conversation and discussion that we've had. I'm going to, in the spirit of Oliver Tambo, exercise leadership and be very brief, in the hope that I inspire my fellow panelists to do the same. There's one thing that the conversation tonight reminded me that I didn't add in my speech, and I think it speaks to a lot of what was said. I can't remember where it was, but someone recounts watching Oliver Tambo giving a speech and a tear coming down his eye because things felt so hopeless. And at the time, it just seemed like the ANC wasn't going anywhere and the struggle wasn't going anywhere and the apartheid state was too powerful. And that's kind of where, well, I mean, I would say the hopelessness we feel is probably not even close to the hopelessness Tambo must have felt trying to engage his audience and actually shedding a tear. So it's not hopeless. We can do something. We can pick ourselves up, but we have to start at the root. And we have to really, in my view, ask ourselves questions not just at the margins of policy. Should we go 1 degree to the left or 1 degree to the right? But how do we reconstitute the whole thing? And that, I think, is an imaginative project which we can really dedicate our energy to. And if we do that, history shows we can move forward. There's no law that South Africa has to be in the doldrums forever. So if Tambo could do it, why can't we?
Thank you. I want to end with a couple of statistics and in response to our fresh 18-year-old happy birthday. And the idea of hope. Last year's election was the first election since 1999 where 18 to 19-year-olds had a lower than 50% turnout. Usually in all of our elections since we kept a voters roll, you have a small percentage of 18 to 19-year-olds that actually register to vote. But when they are registered to vote, they turn out at very high numbers. 2009, 73% turned out. 2014, 83% of 18 to 19-year-olds turned out. 2019, 80% of 18 to 19-year-olds turned out. In 2024, it was 45% of registered 18 to 19-year-olds turned out to vote. So of the ones who went and actually registered, and there were 209,000 more registrations of 18 to 19-year-olds in 2024 than there were in 2019, only 45% of them turned out to vote. And I think that is a reflection of that hopelessness and that despair. What I want to say as a counter to it is that this country is going to be saved by AMA 2000. The best thing about the National Convention for me was AMA 2000. At some point, I told the over 50s to shut up. I told them that they'll be dead in 40 years, so they must please give room to the young people. And when people who are over 40, who were alive in 1994, stopped speaking, the conversation turned productive. Because the people who actually have a stake in the future of this country started talking, started doing the reimagining. And so my hope lies in you, and especially lastly in those young women who are afraid of being statistics. Young women vote at all age groups more than men do. We turn out to vote 5 percentage points just about more than men do at every single age group, particularly more at younger age groups. And yet we don't have a political system that reflects that we are the voters, we are the decision makers of this country. And so I guess I'm throwing the mantle to the young people, especially the young women in the room, to say, take it. Old people have no clue what to do. And I count myself in that. I'm over 40, guys. I'm old. Yeah, it'll be shaped by you guys. And you're the ones who are going to save us.
Thank you. I just want to tackle the question on what was raised about these activities or platforms rather not really producing the desirable outcomes in terms of coming up with solutions. I think we need to really start somewhere. And we can just start right here by having at least this conversation. What is wrong with our society? What areas of concern do we really need to address? Once we're able to do that, it will be very easy for us, even as young people, to understand the role that is being played by adults. We cannot, in our pursuit for this just democratic country, want to erase the existence or the contribution of adults. In order for us to correct what is presently wrong, we need to be able to reflect in the past. And if you look at the past, that's where you find adults, old people, that really helped shape the world that we live in today. So there is just no way that we're going to have a discussion that does not include old people. As a young man, I need to get, at least some guidance from, the elderly, the adults, everybody that is actually a senior to me. And as I said, when I was actually in the SRC a few years ago, my mentor happens to be, it's not one person, by the way, and I'm glad they're sitting on the same table. Now, I had a great relationship with them. And we would actually get to sit down and discuss various issues. But that did not stop me when the time allowed to actually stand up, mobilize students, shut down the gates if we had to. And we would get arrested. Later on, they would call and make means for us to get us out. The point I'm making is, as young people, we need to dispel the notion that old people cannot really contribute to this. And lastly, we need to understand that we are active players in the society. We have the solutions because this is the world we live in and your children are going to live in this world. So if you do not start today to engage in sittings and forums such as this, chances are you may not even be aware of what is wrong with your country. Maybe the concern would be, why are we constantly hosting these events in places such as this, where the masses of our people are in the townships, in the rural areas, where they have no access to internet. Some of them may not even be able to stream this. We ought to have a discussion as to why is UNISA not going to these remote campuses and have these big events where you attract ordinary community members that are going to come and speak and contribute. Thank you very much.
I suspected that Tambo is wise, given what he has just said about old people. It's no longer a suspicion, it's a fact. If you think of the challenges facing South Africa as a baobab tree, women cannot hug that baobab tree alone. Men cannot hug that baobab tree alone. Young people cannot hug that baobab tree alone. Old people cannot hug that baobab tree alone. What must guide us is the understanding that all of us, united, young people, old people, men and women, all of us united, will be able to hug this baobab tree. But I want to go back before I finish to what I said about women. And this is the part I think I must apologize for, or I was apologizing for. women have not been treated by us as fully human. In fact, even religious texts tell us that women are a subspecies. Some religious texts will provide evidence or will give us evidence that women are a subspecies by telling us they came from the rib of those who are men. So to look at a woman is to look at a subspecies. Hence, the manner in which we have treated women. Again, there is no way we will be able to hug this baobab tree only on the basis of the leadership of men. And as I said, history has been, so far, has been the ceaseless repetition of the errors and folly of men. In other words, the world and this country are in this crisis because of men. It is time to give women a chance. It is time to give the leadership of women a chance. For me, Hlubi, the response to the challenges that face us must be twofold. One, they must be political. And because they must be political, as we go back to Oliver Tambo's constitution, we must say South Africa belongs to those who conquered it. And that is the reality. Just leadership must change. South Africa belongs to those who conquered it. That is what we must change, amongst other things. Now, as I said, I don't mean to offend. But Hlubi has told us that Oliver Tambo believed in the cleansing fire of revolution. And here I want to address UNISA and other universities directly. In what they teach and how they teach it, our universities, they must make sure that they become, or the minds of those they teach, become the petrol that fans the cleansing fire of revolution. By being the opposite of what Henry Thoreau says about educational institutions. He says educational institutions have become dead zones of disimagination. This must change if our institution and the minds they teach must become part of that fire, cleansing fire of revolution. Kamakwin.
Thank you everyone.
A round of applause for our panel. Thank you. Yes. Unless you still want to sit here, it's okay. We're enjoying the discussions. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before I continue with the program, I just have a few announcements that I would like to make. If you check on your table, there is a paper that looks like this. It has a QR code. This is the survey, and we request that everyone in attendance today, please do complete the survey so that we can have more of this beautiful discussions going forward. So if you do not have this on your table, please say so that one can be brought on your table. So it's only 1 or 2 per table, so please circulate it so that we can all do the survey. Please do it while we are still here. All right, so the second announcement is that dinner will be served shortly. So after all our speakers, we will have dinner, and we are going to request that we please honor our esteemed guest, starting with the OR Tambo family. They will be the first to go and dish. Our VIP table here, they will follow after the Tambo family. To avoid bumping into each other and stampede, please allow each table to finish, dish, come back, sit down while we listen to music, and also enjoying the life of OR Tambo, which will be played on the screen. So once again, thank you to the panel for wonderful wonderful discussions. However, I am excited, but also a little bit worried. Excited because we learned so much today. And this is also, compelling us to go and learn more about the Tambo legacy. And I'm worried. I'm saying I'm worried because I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, ooh, Dr. Erin Nodier and Dr. Pizwani are probably thinking of a research paper from these discussions. So I won't be surprised when we leave here and then we will be getting to say, colleagues, let's come together, let's do something and have a paper. Because one thing about UNISA, they pride themselves, and one of UNISA's goal is to become a leading Odell research institution. So, without wasting any time, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Natasha Ali. She is the CEO of Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, and she'll be giving us remarks by the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. Please help me to welcome Ms. Ali on stage.
I know we're all very hungry, so I'm gonna keep this quick. Good evening, all protocol observed, please. Sorry, UNISA. As we bring this evening's important dialogue to a close, allow me to extend my deepest gratitude and the gratitude on behalf of the Tambo Foundation to all who have made this occasion possible. First, to our distinguished speakers, and now I know you all know who they are, so I'm not even going to say their names, but all of you. Thank you so much for your thoughtful insights and your willingness to grapple with the difficult questions facing our nation. Each of you, in your own way, has brought Oliver Tambo's legacy with the present, and in so doing, reminded us that legacy is not memory alone. It is action, it is responsibility, and it is vision. I also want to thank my colleagues at UNISA for hosting us once again. This is the 5th year, as you know, of our lecture series, and it wouldn't be possible without your steadfast partnership and your commitment to creating spaces of critical reflection and scholarship. As you know, the theme of tonight's lecture was Legacy in Action, Oliver Tambo's vision and the future of just leadership in South Africa. And it could not be more timely. OR Tambo taught us that leadership is not about power, but about service, not about expediency, but about principle, and not about the individual, but about the collective. And I think reflecting on the last question that we had from the newly turned 18-year-old, if you look at the Bill of Rights, we are enshrined with rights as South Africans, but we are equally enshrined with responsibilities. And we are responsible for each other. So as much as you have the right to things, you are responsible and beholden to your fellow citizens. So you do not need a position of power to be a leader. You can be a leader in your community, in your school, in your family, but it instills upon you responsibilities to your fellow people. OR believed that leadership must always be anchored in justice. Justice for the oppressed, justice for the excluded, justice for the generations to come. That is why he spent decades in exile, sacrificing his own life so that one day South Africa would be free. And it is why his leadership remains such a touchstone for us today. As we reflect on the state of South Africa, we must admit that ours, and I think we all know, is a country at crossroads. Inequality, disillusionment, and social fragmentation threaten to undo the promise of our democracy. Yet, if we return to Tambo's vision, we are reminded that despair is not an option. He showed us that leadership in difficult times must hold fast to the values of justice, humility, and unity. Globally, South Africa is once again being called upon to model what just leadership looks like in a fractured world. Our moral voice for freedom, for equality, for dignity is still very much needed. But that voice will only carry weight if we embody those very values at home. This lecture has reminded us that the legacy of OR is not a monument to the past. It is a call to action for the present and for our future. It is an invitation to each of us, whether in government, civil society, academia, community, to practice just leadership in our daily lives and to demand from it from those who represent us, and to demand it from ourselves. So as we leave tonight, let us carry with us this challenge, to make Tambo's legacy visible not only in words and commemorations, but in action. For it is only through action that his vision of a just and humane society will find life in the South Africa of tomorrow. Thank you.
Good evening again. Thank you, Ms. Ali, for such a lovely remarks and you representing the Adelaide Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation. Now, without taking too much time, because it's been quite a lovely but long afternoon, and at some stage, probably hunger pangs, blood glucose levels are dropping. And, at some stage, sometimes one would say a hungry person is an angry person. So to minimize that anger, I am going to be calling Dr. Enid Bunki Pitswane. She will be responsible for closing remarks and a vote of thanks. But before she comes on stage, I just want to share a little bit of her bio. And also, like as I mentioned before, that I am a research student. I'm a student mentor. So part and parcel of her leadership is also applicable to mentoring. So Dr. Bunki Pitswane is a former president of the South African Association for Counseling and Development in Higher Education. She leads this establishment or should I say the counseling unit, responsible for the Sunnyside, for the whole of Gauteng. So that's Florida, Val, Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg offices. And she leads this unit with passion. What's also important about Dr. Pitswane is that her duties are to provide career development and personal counseling to students. She conducts dialogues and workshops such as women's and health issues, diversity, and not forgetting the fact that she always gives back to the community. And lastly, she's also responsible for training student mentor, which I'm also one of those. And she's also responsible for training career guidance practitioners so that they can ease, the workload and assist the students. So without taking too much time, I would like to introduce Dr. Pitswane.
Dumelang. Dimadegwane. Good evening. I think protocol observed, so that we do not waste time, I would like to take this honor to give a vote of thanks. I deem it a great honor to be proposing a vote of thanks in this prestigious event. And we are really, really appreciative of every one of you who is here today. You have made this event a success. To the Vice Principal and Vice Chancellor in absentia, we are so thankful that you have allowed us to take this opportunity and engage with our students in our partner Oliver Tambo Foundation in this lecture. We are so thankful. And for also allowing our Deputy Registrar, Ms. Joubert, to welcome our guests. Thank you, Liana, for welcoming our guests to this event. And to our Acting Regional Director, Dr. Nodie, thank you for setting the scene and making everybody aware of why we are gathered here. We hope going forward, you will continue to host this memorable lecture. We appreciate that. And to our keynote speaker, Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, we are so empowered today. Thank you so much for having delivered such a wonderful speech. You have explicitly captured the ethos of OR Tambo. Each and every one of us who's here really is empowered. We heard about OR, but today you have really educated us. We are so thankful. And to the discussant, Dr. Stembile, let me start with the ladies first. Dr. Stembile, thank you for reminding us exactly of what is happening in our country, how the leadership is always rotated, and that is something that we need to fight for and make sure that there is a change in our country. And Tambo, our student, he was so worried today, but you really represented us well, our student. Thank you also for reminding us it is important to voice out our dissatisfaction. You spoke about corruption, so that is what we need to talk about. That is what we need to reduce, because we have got the young ones coming after us. What will be left in our country if this keeps on going? And to Gogo, thank you. Your wisdom is appreciated. You touched on so many things: gender-based violence, women issues, indigenous knowledge. That is what we need to be hearing about on day-to-day engagement. We really appreciate your wisdom. Unfortunately, we did not have enough time. I think we needed to hear the discussants engaging further. To our students, I'm so grateful that the young ones are the ones who engaged. So this talk, the lecture actually is aimed at empowering our students so that they can replicate what ORT stood for. And today you showcased that. You asked relevant questions, even though some could not be responded to, but there were answers, or not necessarily answers, there were provoking thoughts that you shared, that we believe that when you live here, you will be able to stand up and do what is right for our country, for you are coming after us. And our students, yes, I have recognized you. To everybody who's here, the organizing team, UNISA delegates at large, we are so thankful for you to having supported this event. To the program, young program directors, you did as well. You really steered this ship so well. You are really appreciated. We are glad that we are mentoring you into doing what is right. And I think we can pat ourselves at the back to say that we are doing good. And to DIA, our partners, marketing team, the UNISA marketing team, to everybody who is here, we are so thankful for your presence. And the choir, I shouldn't forget you, choir from Unity. Thank you for really gracing this occasion. We are thankful, and I know you will continue to do that as we are having supper. And on that note, everyone, our sign language interpreters, thank you so much for being here. And to those who are online, thank you. Unfortunately, you are not here with us, but we appreciate you in absentia. You make this possible. Everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We have come to the end of our evening. So as requested earlier, can we start with the Tambo family? I believe food is ready. Is food ready? Can I see? Can someone at the back maybe just indicate if the food is ready? Oh, yes. Okay, thank you. Can we? Yes, you can dish. Come back, enjoy your food, and after the Tambo family, you can be followed by the VIP. Okay, I'm made to understand that there's 2 VIP tables. I will request them to also stand with the Tambo family to go dish, and then after that, then all of us can go dish. But it will be best that we do it, per table to avoid stepping on each other. Thank you, everyone. Can we have the choir maybe just to come and give us a little something?